Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Everything Websites, the podcast where we break down what makes websites work in the real world. And today we are diving into Webflow without developers. So we're going to talk about how internal teams, marketeers, and non-technical users can make most out of it. Joining me today is Felix, who is a creator behind Design Based Studio. And if you ever search for YouTube or Webflow tutorials, chances are you'll come across his work. So Felix has built a reputation for making Webflow feel less like a development tool and more like a collaborative platform for marketers, designers, and even content writers. So Felix, welcome to the show.
Hi, Stefan. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so maybe we can start with something about Webflow education. So what do you think, why that matters for people beyond freelancers, especially maybe for internal teams and non-technical users of the Webflow or the website?
I think it really matters because there's probably a majority of Webflow users or Webflow developers that actually have a design background. I mean, even though it's a no-code tool and you don't need to touch code, it's still code that happens under the hood from Webflow. And I think it's worth learning the fundamentals of CSS and HTML and JavaScript to just become a good Webflow developer. Yeah, level up your skills as a designer with that.
Yeah. Okay. So that's one part of it. Is there any, for example, if you are someone who is not a developer designer and someone else built a website for you, for example, like yourself, and they need to continue using Webflow, are there any like misunderstandings when they first time adopt Webflow? Is there anything difficult for them?
Yes, I think that's the advantage of Webflow, but it also can turn a little bit into a disadvantage. I've seen that in the past because it's very easy to log into Webflow and just have entrance to the design mode. And
Yeah.
I always warn our clients, I always tell them, if possible, give your team members only access to the build mode and have like just one seat with a development designer mode, because you can do everything in the designer, but you can also break everything.
Yes.
That's something I experienced, that sometimes clients a little bit misunderstand what they can, how easy things even can break in Webflow. I mean, just go to an element that has some global classes, and let's say you want to change the size of a heading on a particular page, and you say, oh yeah, I'm just going to change this size, and you actually change a global class and a utility class, and without knowing it, you maybe change the size of all headings on the entire website. This can happen. That's why it's also worth educating marketing teams that are not designers or developers.
Yeah, happens to me a lot of times as well, because I don't know if it's just about the promotion that Webflow has. I mean, like everybody can use it, but maybe not everyone should. Yes, it's very easy to just change something and updates everywhere, but then you need to be very careful of what you're doing there. You need to be familiar. That's why we have systems like Client-First and stuff like that, so that it can be managed easily, so that you don't misuse a class like you mentioned. But for example, that's more of a designer mode. But if we're talking about the Webflow editor mode, which things like that are less likely to happen, are there any maybe common roadblocks for non-technical people when they use Webflow editor mode?
Yeah, like in the old editor mode, I always say that the white editor mode, you know, when you go to the URL of your website and you add a question mark added to it, it's deprecated. I think it won't be available for a long time anymore. But in this old editor mode, it was possible to change the content of components even if the content was not connected to a property. An example is the main navigation. Usually the content of the main navigation is not connected to a property, because if you make changes, you want to happen these changes globally. You know, makes sense. But it was possible to added these components in the old editor mode anyway, you just got like a hint from Webflow. You are editing a global element, and this will adapt to all instances of this element. And I think this was good because it still happens a lot of times that marketing teams want to make changes to a global CTA section, or maybe want to make changes to the main navigation or update something in the footer. Then it's always like, yeah, but that's something you only can do in the designer. And I think then if you have to jump forth and back between build mode and design mode, chances are high that you end up staying in design mode.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I wish Webflow would reintroduce, to be able to update components even if the content is not connected to properties.
That's interesting. I don't remember that one, but I'm not sure if they're gonna do that, because that's why I think they introduced seats in Webflow, because now they're saying like, okay, so if you want to be able to do that, then you need to buy a design seat, and then only a designer or developer can do it, and others can just edit content. So I don't think they are going into that direction, but I mean, it sounds interesting. They just change it for probably many reasons, and as I said, I don't know if they're gonna go back to that right now. Are there any maybe tips? Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to add, I can understand what you're saying, but if you jump into the role of a customer, a global CTA section that is not connected to properties, for example, at the newsletter section, for them it's still content. They understand if they make changes here, these changes apply globally, but they don't really understand, okay, why can I only do this from design mode?
Yeah, and I know now what you mean. So are you thinking that maybe only for components this can be doable, or maybe for some other stuff as well? Okay, so we'll see. I mean, it's an interesting idea, so we'll see what if they're gonna take this into consideration. But are there any tips so that people who didn't work with tools like Webflow before, to make them feel more confident with Webflow? Is there something you would recommend them to do in order to feel confident?
Yes, I think you should always start with watching at least the basic tutorials from the Webflow University, just to get familiar with how the fundamentals of Webflow work,
Yeah.
But the rest of the website is probably pretty specific. How to change content on this section, how to do these and that, how are the collections structured and stuff like this. What do you need to update in a collection? What do you need to update directly on a page? It's very specific. For stuff like this, we always record Loom videos for our customers. Often we end up recording Loom videos for each section, or at least each type of or each component, so they know how to change stuff on the components, how to update it when they need to jump into the design mode, if they want to make changes to the main navigation, for example.
Yeah, I agree. Watching more of videos and maybe even trying things by themselves will give them that confidence with the platform. I know that also many people complain that the learning curve on Webflow is pretty steep, and I agree. But if you want to have like a very good professional tool, and it needs to be like that. It cannot be done in a couple of minutes.
That's true.
Yeah. Well, what do you think it makes Webflow easier or maybe harder in some cases for people that are not very familiar with the platform?
Pardon?
What do you think makes Webflow easier or harder for people that are not familiar with the platform?
Okay. I mean, Webflow offers great flexibility to marketing teams. For instance, if you build the website only with components, they can jump into build modes and build entire landing pages themselves without the need of a developer. But this flexibility always comes with complexity. I think flexibility never comes without complexity, but that's our job, to educate them on it, and that's of course something they have to be aware. If they come from something like, let's say, Squarespace, it has less flexibility and it's less complex.
Yeah.
And when you then jump into Webflow, just to have more flexibility, you have to be aware that it also will get more complex.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. We mentioned in the beginning a little bit of like different the classes. So we all know, or people who don't know, there are many different frameworks that people use. Some of them, like most popular, like Client-First by FinSuite. There is also Lumos from Demetrix, Relume, maybe even one of the most popular. So what do you think if those frameworks confuse people more, the people that are not technical, or maybe help?
I think it can help them if they are willed to get into it. I mean, FinSuite Client-First doesn't help you if you don't jump into the documentation and read about it.
Yeah.
That's the same for each framework. But if you do, I think it can be very valuable for the customers.
Yeah, that's true. In the end, ultimately, you really need to get familiar with the stuff in order to get more comfortable with it. I know also that Webflow, I mean, if you never worked with Webflow, can be quite challenging to learn, but also not as much in my experience compared to other platforms. They also have pretty good tutorials. But do you think is there anything the Webflow itself can improve to onboard people easier, or maybe even without more too much explanation uh, when they start with Webflow?
Yes. For example, the onboarding process is, I don't know, when was it the last time that you've created a new account on Webflow and set up a workspace?
A long time ago. I mean,
Yeah.
from time to time, I do advise clients on how to do it. But
Yeah,
for
me too.
example, yeah, not just creating an account, but also after that, if they want to do something, update something, even in editor
And
mode.
they should cover different use cases, because if
Yeah.
you create a new account, set up workspace, all this stuff, it directly pushes you into setting up a project and telling you how to start building a website. And
Yeah.
this can be very confusing if you tell the client, just create a workspace and leave it like it is, and once we're done with the website, we transfer the project
Yeah.
to your workspace. And it's like they get pushed into creating a project and starting to develop. It's like, I've done this with several clients in a video call, and they got really confused by it. Like, hey, I don't want to create a website and stuff like this now.
Yeah, also happens many times exactly the same thing, that they just create an account and then create a website and buy even a plan for it.
Yeah.
And that is confusing. I don't blame them because they don't know what it's for, and especially because you have a workspace plan, you have a site plan, you have add-ons. It's very confusing. Pricing is very confusing in Webflow, so I think this stuff should be improved, like you
Yeah.
said.
I mean, if you know about all this stuff, it makes sense to have a workspace plan. It makes sense to have website plans and stuff like this. But for each new client, it's really confusing. They always need our assistance in just make a calculation how much they will pay for Webflow. Maybe they should have like a chatbot on their pricing page, that asks you like, okay, how many team members, how many websites and stuff like this, and then how many pages, how much traffic, just easy questions almost each client could answer. And then he gives you an evaluation. Okay, probably this workspace, this amount of seats, and this site plan is the right for you.
That's a good idea. They may also introduce, maybe even when you create an account, to ask you if you're familiar with the platform or not. And if you are familiar, it can be just, like it is now. And if
Yeah,
you're
or
not
just have like,
familiar,
yeah,
and
just
if
to
you're
have
not
like a
familiar, just to
question.
have steps. Yeah, questions. Like a
Yeah,
questionnaire. And then they just have steps. So, okay, if you're not familiar with the platform, this is the first step. You need to do this. This is the second step. Maybe even ask you, are you going to build it by yourself or someone else? If it's someone else, this is what they're going to do. Maybe some stuff like that. I don't know. Maybe they're not good ideas, but I think it's something to think about to improve this. especially because
Absolutely.
they do focus on non-technical people.
Yeah, and if they choose the answer, we're working together with a freelancer agency, while creating the account. Then it's not this onboarding that is pushing you into creating a first website.
Yeah.
So it's just like, okay, here's your workspace. Now tell your Webflow partner that you've created your workspace and ask for the next steps.
Yeah, that's also a good idea because really right now they just create an account and right away buy a plan. Even if I tell, I do really need to tell them, don't do it, just don't buy anything, just create an account. And I need to do that for every client, which it's also exhausting. But as I said, very confusing for clients because they don't know how these things work.
I guess they do that to push sales, but I mean, at the end, then it's like, okay, now we booked a site plan on a project that we are not going to need.
But from that part, also Webflow is very helpful with the support because they do allow you now. It's almost instant. Even if you create like a template or whatever, you can transfer easily plan. But if you bought a workspace plan, then you cannot transfer it. But maybe I think they can even refund you the money. I don't know. I'm not sure about that part. But for transferring the plan, that's super easy. But like we said, maybe just onboarding can be improved for that. I think that will be helpful a lot.
That's true.
Okay, so do you have any advices on the best practices for teams when use, for example, Webflow Editor? Because now we mostly talk about non-technical people. So any advices for best practices?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is really to decide at the beginning who gets designer access and who gets just build mode access. That makes a huge difference in the long-term maintainability of your website. Because if there's too many people in the design mode and they make changes here and changes there, stuff starts to break, then somebody comes and fixes this bugs just with with another bug. Yeah. Sooner or later, your website will be, it will be so many uncommon bug fixes that, and then when a professional like us comes and starts to fix this stuff, then you fix a bug at one place and then it appears another bug somewhere else.
Yeah, that happens.
Sooner or later, you run into the situation that you say like, okay, we can't handle that anymore. It's like we need to refactor the entire website, so rebuild it. And so that's very important. That's why it's very important to give most of the people of your team only build mode access because they can't break things there. I know it can feel like a little bit less flexibility because, okay, I want to update the CTA and this can only be done in design mode. And now I have to ask my colleague who has design mode, but I need to make these changes now and not tomorrow and stuff like this. But I think
But it's also super fast. It's not that it's difficult, takes a lot of time. They also manage to make this very fast to update whatever it is.
So I think this is really important. The second thing
team
is
structure.
the team structure, the role management.
Yeah.
Role and right management. And the second thing is that you need a good foundation of components, and you also need a naming system for these components.
Right.
So that people know what to use and where to use.
Yeah, I agree. But given that, okay, so we work a lot with different people from different industries, some technical, some non-technical. Some people know even more that they should all this stuff. Any tips on how clients could collaborate better with the Webflow agencies, freelancers, or developers? Any advices on that?
Yeah, but that's more about project management, I would say. I think it makes sense to have like at least once a month or maybe every 2 weeks do a fix meeting with your clients and just plan the next month and say like, okay, what are we going to do this month? Do you have any marketing events? Do you visit any fairs or something like this? Do you need new landing pages? Make frequent checkups of the website, SEO checkups, page speed checkups, and stuff like this. Just plan what you're doing and schedule all this stuff together with the client, because this makes really sense, especially if you work on a retainer basis with a client. It's not only the client who benefits from it, it's also you as a freelancer or agency who benefits from it, because you can plan out your weeks and months, and you have a much better overview of your workload. And you can answer the question for yourself: do I have still capacities for another client or another project?
Since you mentioned that, because recently some agencies just focus on fixed price projects. Some agencies focusing on this subscriptions, like monthly subscription. For example, you as a client, if you are a client, what do you think would be better for you to work with a fixed price or a subscription?
I had this discussion
Do's and
with
don'ts.
clients, and at least in many. I mean, we work a lot with tech companies or SaaS startups, and they're more modern, I would say. But some kind of old industries, people are not used to stuff like fixed prices or something like this. They at least if it's like a retainer, and you say, okay, you pay a certain amount, and we do everything for that. They get skeptical. They say like, okay, where's the where's the how do you say where's the
Sometimes they ask like, what happens if we have a certain amount of hours and then we don't use them all? Then what happens with those hours?
yeah, that's true. But my experience with this unlimited fixed price retainers is that they only make sense if they have high volume. Let's say like, at least I wouldn't sell a fixed price retainer under 3,000 euros. Otherwise it doesn't make sense. We once had a customer, we had like a fixed retainer with them for something like 700 euros. It didn't include anything, only special kind of work, but this kind of like content updates over their entire website.
Yeah.
And for all the development and design work, we had like a classical retainer with a monthly hourly quota.
Yeah.
But these two kinds of works, they constantly mixed up together. It was really hard to say like, okay, this is covered by the fixed price retainer, and this is something that goes on the hourly quota. It was really confusing for us and for the client. So either you're saying we only have this only the fixed price retainer model, but I think it only makes sense if you sell it to clients that also have a high demand. Yeah, so something like 3,000 euros a month or even more.
Yeah.
But in my experience, there's not many clients that have this high demand on it. And at least in Germany, my experience is with companies, if they have this high demand for a Webflow developer, they would either hire somebody instead of.
Well, it always depends. Depends on what kind of things you offer. If they're just gonna look for someone to do updates from time to time and have them all the time, like I said, makes sense for them just to hire someone. But for example, if you and your team or you alone provide many other things, or maybe just super high quality stuff where a person they hire cannot cover because it requires a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge, then it makes sense more for them to work with you. So I think it's maybe more of a question of positioning around the people that need these kind of things. And given that we talked about the people really need to know something about the platform if they wanna work with it, even if they don't gonna develop, they do need to know something about that. Maybe a question for you would be, what kind of skills those people need to develop in 2025 to work better with the Webflow? Is there any certain skills?
You mean clients or designers?
Yeah, clients like marketeers or just CEOs of the small companies, or I don't know.
I mean, how
They
they
need to learn code.
Pardon? No, they don't need to learn coding. If they would need to learn coding, something would be wrong, I would say.
Yeah.
I mean, it all depends on how the website got set up. If it's like
That's
set
true.
up, if it's set up component first, then it's quite easy for them to make changes, or at least 90% of the changes they want to do. Then it's enough for them to get trained by their Webflow partner. But if they want to really deep dive into it and want to make all further adjustments themselves, of course, then they would need to learn Webflow like a developer. And we have clients that want to do that.
Yeah.
It's like they have somebody in their marketing team who's willed to change his job description and become like a part-time Webflow developer. And I tell them, you can do that, of course, but I mean, you have to sit down and learn everything for at least 3 months, and depending on what experience you have before with developing websites.
Yeah. I mean, from my perspective, I would more maybe advise them to, even if they didn't before, to develop a skill of management so that they can manage better their, I don't know, the team they have. So who's going to do one part, who's going to do what? Maybe that's going to be more important, especially in the future, especially with the rise of the AI. It's going to be more important than just learning how to build stuff by yourself. We're close to the end, so I just want to ask you, actually, we did manage that. I wanted to ask like a common mistakes when managing or updating sites, but I think we mentioned it. But okay, just for the end, what would be the common mistakes people do when manage or update the site?
Yeah, I think one thing we already covered is like going into the design mode and unintendedly change global classes, like, I don't know, change the spacing somewhere between a heading and a paragraph, and then suddenly you change the spacing everywhere. So that's one of the common mistakes. Yeah, something common mistakes that is quite new is, this update possibilities and processes you have with collection items. You can save changes, you can publish them instantly, you can draft changes and stuff like this. And I can see people make changes on CMS items and then give us a call or write an email like, hey, I've updated something here, but it's not live.
Yeah. Or something happened. What should I do now?
Yeah, that's something very common. But I think the most common thing I see is people uploading images that are either too large or too small in dimensions and file size, both.
Yes, that's a pretty common one. I know that one. Okay, for the end, do you have anything like any advice or key takeaway for marketeers, non-technical people regarding the workflow?
Yeah, if I as a marketer, if I would relaunch my website in 2025 with Webflow, I would really go with a component first setup. So everything should be built with components and connected to properties where necessary, because this gives you just the greatest amount of flexibility as a marketer to update pages and create new landing pages. And the second thing is, even though Webflow offers you a great flexibility, it still requires its own processes, of how to create pages, how to update pages and stuff like this. Get familiar with this.
Good. Okay, so Felix, thank you so much for being part of this chat. It's always great to talk with someone who is also experienced by Webflow educator like yourself. For the end, where people can find you, find your tutorials, maybe even recommendations for some starting points of how to learn about Webflow.
Yeah, I mean, you find my Webflow tutorials on YouTube. Just search for Design Base. I think you won't find it by searching for my name, because it's the YouTube channel is called Design Base, like the agency. Or just visit our website, designbase.studio. We also have a couple of tutorials over there. I think that's a great starting point. I also love to create like basic tutorials, because often I see Webflow project and it's the lack of basics I can see in many projects, like proper class naming system and stuff like this. So I think it's worth educating people about that. I even send some of the tutorials to my customers to see like, okay, you want to learn more about the class naming system we've used, then watch this tutorial.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's a good thing to have because you don't need to repeat yourself all the time. Sometimes you just send them a link. It's much easier like that. Okay. Again, thank you so much for being part of this
You're welcome.
episode. For you guys, if you wanna, you can watch this on YouTube. You can listen to Spotify. You can find more episodes there as well. You can follow me on LinkedIn. So please, if you like the content, or like, share, subscribe, and comment as well if you want to have any specific questions or maybe even some suggestions and ideas. So see you guys next time. Enjoy. Bye.
Bye bye.